So in this video I'm going to say a little bit about the various models and improvements to the simulator and how much of that was evolution and how much of it was revolution. So the simulator is based around a general aviation aircraft, Piper Tomahawk. Aircraft of choice for a lot of flying schools because it's relatively straightforward to fly, it's stable and handles well, and it's quite easy to look after. I personally prefer general aviation aircraft. I quite like taking off and landing. I'll often just fly circuits or between local airports. Some people will fly larger airliners, they'll fly jets, and you can pretty much fly within reason whatever aircraft you want, regardless of what simulator you build. So the heart of the simulator is based around the computer or computers. When I first became involved in simulation in the 80s, computers were really basic. Microsoft Flight Simulator 3 was based on a program operating system called MS-DOS. And for those of you who are old enough to remember that, you'll know how basic that was. But shortly afterwards, around the 90s and through to around 2000, there was a period of revolution in computers where computers seemed to be doubling in power. Not quite overnight, but almost. And we moved from some really basic computers through to some quite powerful computers by the time we got to the Pentium computers, although by today's standards they were still quite slow. And equally important, the graphics capabilities of computers were improving exponentially, and graphics are a key element of having a good experience on a flight simulator. So my current simulator is based around an RTX 280 Ti and an i9 processor. And I'll say a little bit more about in later videos about how you can tweak and how you can balance the effects of the CPU, the central processing unit, the processor, and the GPU, the graphics processing unit, the graphics card. And various elements of the different simulators will be impacted by the speed and the power of those different elements of your simulator. And it's hard to say really which is the one you should invest in the most, because one or other can become a bottleneck if you're not careful. So here's the first layout of the simulator. So it was based on a basic wooden frame with some pipe lagging for the edging. Not a good choice on reflection. It was not very robust and it needed to be repaired quite a lot. So the simulator needs to be carried down from the top of a wardrobe and clamped on in front of the main family computer each time that I used it, and that made it quite cumbersome. It then evolved quite quickly. The second version of the simulator was based around some laminate flooring. In favour of the pipe lagging, the edging was some car door edging that I'd got off eBay. I was broadly happier with that version, but it still had to be lifted down from the top of the wardrobe. It still had to be clamped on each time that I wanted to use it, which meant that I wasn't using it as much as I might otherwise. Immersion became a bit of a focus, and it's a theme that's recurred throughout my journey through the different models of the simulator. And here's my first attempt at immersion. Some side panels made out of polystyrene and covered in plastic, complete with a printed overhead panel. But again, this had to be assembled each time that I wanted to use the computer, and it continued to be quite cumbersome, meaning that I used the computer and the simulator less than I would have done otherwise. I once saw in a car park on the side of a Land Rover a sign that said, if it isn't broken, fix it till it is. And I think that phrase pretty much sums up my relationship with the simulator. I would much rather build, fix, tweak the computers or the simulator than actually fly it. I find the challenges of building and getting the software, particularly across the network, to connect, to be quite engrossing, and that distracts me from other stresses that I might have. Thoughts turn to how it could be more stable and how I would use it more, and then the idea developed around converting the box room into a flight room, or as it became known, a man cave. It became a much bigger project than either my wife or I had imagined. Cabled through HDMI cable and USB cables from the front to the back room to enable me to use some of the power of the computer in the main front room, as well as the flight computer in the box room. Quite a major renovation, new power, new cabling connections, a whole new refit of the room, and it eventually started to take shape, new curtains and carpets. And my wife had a great idea to buy some Spitfires to act as tiebacks, which was a nice way just to finish off the room. But it soon became clear that having just the one main panel, the one main screen, was quite restrictive, and when I needed to access air traffic control or weather, it was quite difficult. And so I began to add, you can see here, a couple of screens to access ATC and weather, and that was quite a good addition. It made it much more accessible, much more usable, and that evolved into adding two side screens, again back to the challenge of immersion. So side screens where they could expand the simulator off just the single monitor and wrap around a little bit to make the whole thing feel more realistic. Had a great deal of trouble with the side panels. They must have been refitted about 4 or 5 times in terms of height before I was happy. And then I wrestled with getting the field of view and the graphics on each of the panels to match up with the main simulator. X-Plane in particular allows for each panel to be separately configured. You do need to remember that you have to have the simulator, the primary screen needs to be the left hand if you've got 3 screens running left to right. Otherwise, X-Plane does not seem to want to play, at least in my experience. But then you can then intervene and change each of the screens. It is really, really fiddly. And what I found was it was extremely resource intensive for the graphics card to run the 3 different types of settings on the 3 different screens. By far the most straightforward way to do this is simply to open the simulator in windowed mode on the central monitor, and then using the mouse and holding down the left mouse button, just expanding out the simulator to each of the 2 side screens, then expanding up the main window to the top of the screen, and you'll find it goes full screen. And in my opinion, that is by far the most effective and most straightforward way to get the simulator to work effectively across the 3 screens. I think my weirdest idea, again tied up in the idea of immersion, was to build a tent. This was built around some plastic piping and some camouflage sheeting. It was actually useless. The idea was, I thought, quite good, built around a kind of arcade type approach where it would focus my attention onto the main screen. But in fact, it took longer to build than it actually ended up being used, much I think to my wife's relief. The best immersion addition that I found. I added a curtain rail around the simulator on the ceiling, and initially used a couple of shower curtains to pull around, and that evolved into some more robust and more heavy duty long blackout curtains. And for the flight room in particular, which I said is the box room, particularly if the sun comes through the window of an evening or an afternoon, it is really quite useful. It reduces the glare on the screen. It really improves the immersion. And for my mind, that has been one of the most effective changes I've made to increase the immersion for my simulator. And that's all I've got for you today, and I'll catch you next time.